How much has Scientology shaped your worldview?
When we say worldview, do we just mean like the nature of existence?
Well, how you look at the world. You spoke earlier on about, in essence, in a critical fashion, describing how you're taught, in effect, to see yourself as your own God, and you recognise that as, to put it mildly, inappropriate as a way to see oneself. So you recognise that, but you've been exposed to a certain mindset for a long time, and in the
Yeah.
way that children often have their views shaped by their parents because that's who they're exposed to, that you have been exposed to an organization which, in essence, its very existence is about controlling you, causing you to behave in a particular way, to do what that organization wants to protect its interests, and to cause you to look at people in a particular way. That strikes me as a fairly significant force that's been applied against you. And therefore, do you ever examine yourself and think, has this shaped my worldview? Do I see the world this way because of them? Have I thrown off the shackles of it? I'm
Yeah.
interested to understand the extent to which you feel that it's caused you to see the world in a particular way, that maybe you fight against it, that it still has an impact on you.
Yeah, it's a good question. And if I'm being honest, it might not be totally apparent to me the ways in which Scientology has or still does shape my worldview, but I'll give this a shot.
Sure.
So there's the negative aspect of the potentially negative aspect of making someone believe that they are themselves essentially a god, if that's taken to an absurd degree. There's a positive aspect in putting someone in a frame of mind where they feel that anything in their life that is a problem for them, there is something effective they can do about it, no matter what. And um, it's funny because all the things I'm going to say sound like positive takeaways. So just work with, bear with me on this.
Certainly.
Because honestly, I consider myself to have pretty strong determination, pretty good confidence, pretty good persistence. I'm very positive, and I'm proactive on things. And because the only path that I traveled was Scientology, it's very hard for me to not think that Scientology gets the credit for those aspects of myself that I think are positive. Because I go, well, to who else would the credit go? I don't.
Yeah.
And if I'm sitting here and I go, well, it's just genetic, then it sounds like I'm just patting myself on the back or something. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like the positive aspects that there are to be taken from Scientology, I feel like I have taken from Scientology. And I'm not sure I'm capable of being entirely aware of the negative aspects that I've still taken.
Mm-hmm.
Or that I have taken away from them and continue to carry with me. I feel like my detractors are probably more aware of those things. I mean, for example, my detractors very casually call me a narcissist, a malignant narcissist, nonetheless. And so I would maybe ask you, how would I know if I were one?
Well, most narcissists don't know that they are.
Mm.
So the difficulty that you would face it's actually quite simple. There are a number of narcissists that know that they are, therefore they never need to ask the question because they know what they are. They might not necessarily think, oh, I am a narcissist, but they will recognize the behaviors in themselves that cause them to behave in a different way, which ultimately, so by way of example, I didn't wake up one day and think, oh, I'm a narcissist. It was as a consequence of something that an ex-girlfriend had said. But I knew that I was different in numerous ways. So I always knew that my behaviors were different to that of other individuals. So I just didn't have a label for it. But I had that awareness. But the vast majority of narcissists don't know what they are. So what would happen is, for example, if you are one and you're an unaware one, your narcissism simply won't let you process the suggestion that you are one. It's like a bit of wiring has been taken out of your brain, so you can't process it. It's like saying to a blind person, describe that over there, and they go, describe what? Because they can't see it. So the narcissism for many narcissists blinds them to what they are because it's a self-defense mechanism. They're not allowed, in effect, to know what they are, because if they did, it wouldn't function properly. It wouldn't be seamless. It wouldn't be instantaneous. It wouldn't be instinctive. So if you are one, no matter how much evidence would be put to you, you would be rejecting it because your narcissism would in fact be rejecting it on your behalf. Now, everybody has narcissistic traits. That's something different. So you'll have vanity, you'll have pride, you'll have resentment, and other narcissistic traits, and many of those things can function in a healthy way when they're ensconced within empathic traits. But if you were a narcissist, you would need control, you'd need fuel, but you wouldn't recognize that. Your narcissism would always suggest it's something else. So you've mentioned your detractors, and you're obviously familiar that there are a number of them. You're something of a public figure. So, you know, you have your YouTube channel and you've given various interviews and you've articulated various views about differing topics. This is entirely your right. But by being in the public eye, that means you attract commentary about you, and you've taken some considerable criticism from certain quarters. What's your view of those criticisms that have been made about you?
They think I'm horribly abusive of other former Scientologists and try to keep everyone else down so that I'm the king of the hill and the top of the pile, and only my voice and the voices of people who are loyal to me and friendly to me are heard. And it almost cracks me up because it's the exact opposite of everything I've tried to do on YouTube. Like the moment I found success, the first thing I tried to do was to get as much people to share in the success that I was having.
I'm interested to see if you might be able to hit upon what might be their driver to go against you. You fairly observed, if that were me and I essentially fell out of love with somebody that I watched on the internet or such, I would just move on. So your reaction is that, but that isn't theirs. They're different for some reason. So I wonder if you've ever sort of thought to yourself, if it were me, I'd just move on. So why is it? Why is it that they seem to be intent on destroying what I've built up? Is it envy?
I do think,
or is
it makes
do they
them
think
feel
they're on a moral?
important.
Makes them feel important.
I don't think it's envy, because I think envy would imply they were trying to accomplish the same thing I'm that they were trying to, or that they wished they could accomplish what I've accomplished. And a lot of these people aren't even in the public sphere, so I don't think that's what motivates them. I think it makes them feel important to anoint me the bad guy, and it makes them the Batman to try to be taking me down in some way. But I realized when I say that, it sounds like I'm just being dismissive and critical. I just don't have another explanation for it. I think it makes them feel like they are engaged in something important.
What about turning around and saying, given that you were in there from the age of 4, and some people may well have a degree of sympathy towards you as a consequence of the fact that you had no choice. You weren't recruited into this organization. You were essentially immersed into it without any choice whatsoever. What if you were to turn around and say, I'm simply a product of the environment that I was brought up in. I am a product of Scientology. I can't help the way that I am.
I mean, I think in a certain from a certain perspective, that would be a valid statement. It tends not to be how I feel. I just personally don't approach life from a perspective of using your past as an excuse for anything. But it is sort of ironic that is what any former Scientologist could say in response to all of the lies and the criticisms that Scientology heaps their way. But it is an interesting take on it. Like, if I am what you say I am, then that's what you made me. Because the truth is that would be the truth.
Do you think that Scientology has impacted on you in any way that it makes life difficult for you today in terms of your personality, the person that you are?
I do think, and I'm not sure I'm going to know the exact right words to use here, but there's something with my approach to relationships, a sort of a distance an automatic separation that exists between me and the other person, no matter how close I get to that person, that I can't help but feel comes from my Scientology experience, where you might call it, I don't know, intimacy problems, as far as really, really getting close to people, even the people who are closest to me. I feel like it's lazy for me to automatically say that's because of Scientology. How do I know it's not genetic? How do I know it's not something else? I don't know, but I can't help but feel like there's some Scientology cause for what I'm referring to.
And so you recognize that you have some, as you've described it, intimacy issues in your personal relationships.
Yeah, and realize I don't mean like, when I say intimacy, I don't mean like romantically, but
no, I understand.
Yeah.
Interpersonal relationships, I understand.
Yes, and I'm very aware, and I've you know, I even say this in my videos a lot. I very, very much struggle with showing appreciation and love, in a meaningful way. It's something I struggle with. And I've never known if it was specifically a Scientology thing or not. It's just so much of my life has been Scientology. I was taken out of school at 12. I don't have a high school diploma. I never went to college, but you know, I've had a lot of exposure to the real world. You know, I've been, even though I was working full time for Scientology, I was also working in the real world just to make money to pay the bills. So, showing appreciation and gratitude and love is something I struggle with, and I just don't know what the right
can you give me an example of that? Give me an example of how you struggle with it.
I tend to compliment someone by complimenting something they did instead of complimenting them as a person. Like, you know, it's easier for me to go, that's a job well done, than to say, you're a great friend and you mean a lot to me. Like, I don't know that I've ever said that to anybody. You know?
Okay. Yeah, but you recognize the distinction.
I recognize the distinction, and I recognize that it makes me uncomfortable to show that sort of personal, or to express that sort of personal affection, even if I feel it. There's something about expressing it that makes me deeply uncomfortable. And I sort of assume that the other person will just know how I feel and I shouldn't have to say it. And I don't know why I feel that way.
Yeah. And you think that your upbringing in Scientology could have impacted on you in that way?
I very much do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's assume that that's right. Let's assume, and it's entirely conceivable. It's hardly a great leap of logic to suggest that the way that you've been brought up in a cult has now made you the man that you are today, and that it impacts upon your ability to have meaningful interpersonal relationships. How does that make you feel?
A bit sad, you know. I guess I'm somewhat fortunate that in many ways in my life I've been very, very successful. So I tend not to linger and dwell on negativity or negative things, but there is a sadness, there is a regret regarding this area of my life that we're talking about. But I don't sit here and dwell on it, but it's there. You know what I mean?
I understand. Throw something out to you that's pretty expansive. What would you say is wrong with the world today?
Oh my goodness. I don't claim to be that enlightened to know the answer to that question.